Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
The headlights of my Ford pickup cut through the darkness like twin accusations, sweeping across the parking lot of the Sunset Motel at exactly 2:47 a.m. I knew the time because I'd been checking my phone obsessively for the past hour, following the GPS tracker I'd secretly installed on Lena's BMW 3 weeks ago. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles had gone white. And when I saw her car parked outside room 237, something inside my chest cracked like old ice. 23 years of marriage. 23 years of believing her business trips were actually business trips. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, listening to the tick of cooling metal and the distant hum of the interstate. The motel was one of those places that looked like it had been frozen in 1987. Neon vacancy sign flickering weakly, cracked asphalt, and the kind of rooms you rented by the hour. Not exactly where I'd expected to find my wife, the respectable HR director of Hartwell Tech Solutions. The door to room 237 was painted that particular shade of green that only exists in cheap motels and government buildings. Light leaked around the edges of the heavy curtains, and I could hear voices inside. Lena's laugh, bright and musical in a way it hadn't been at home for months. And another voice, deeper, male. I'd suspected for weeks, maybe months if I was being honest with myself. The late meetings that stretched past midnight. The new clothes, expensive ones that she claimed were necessary for maintaining professional image. The way she'd started going to the gym religiously, coming home with that particular glow that had nothing to do with cardio equipment. But suspecting and knowing are two different animals entirely. I climbed out of the truck, my work boots crunching on broken glass and cigarette butts. The October air was sharp with the promise of winter, and I could see my breath in small puffs as I approached the door. My heart was hammering against my ribs, like it was trying to break free and run away from what was about to happen. I didn't knock. The door wasn't properly latched, swinging open at my touch to reveal a scene that would be burned into my memory forever. Lena was there all right, wearing nothing but a hotel towel and a guilty expression that transformed into pure terror when she saw me. And there was Dr. Joel Hartman, her chiropractor, the same smug bastard who'd been treating her back problems twice a week for the past 6 months. He wasn't wearing a towel. Jesus Christ, Mick! Lena scrambled backward, clutching the towel to her chest. What are you doing here? Funny thing, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I was about to ask you the same question. Joel had the decency to look embarrassed for about half a second before his face settled into that practiced smile he probably used on his patients. Look, Mick, this isn't what it looks like. I almost laughed. Really? Because it looks like you're screwing my wife in a motel room that costs $40 a night. But please, enlighten me about what it actually is. Lena stood up, still gripping the towel, her face flushed with anger now instead of shame. Don't you dare take that tone with me. You have no right to follow me around like some kind of stalker. I have no right? The words came out louder than I'd intended. I'm your husband, Lena. Remember? That guy you married in front of 300 people? The one who's been paying for your car, your clothes, your gym membership, so you could get in shape to screw Dr. Feelgood here? Joel stepped forward, puffing out his chest like he was about to defend her honor. He was younger than me by maybe 8 years, with the kind of artificially white teeth and spray tan that screamed midlife crisis. You need to calm down, man. We're all adults here. Adults? I repeated the word like it tasted bad. Is that what we're calling it? That's when Joel made his first mistake. He put his hand on my shoulder. I'd been working construction and then managing Peterson's hardware for 15 years. My hands were calloused from handling lumber and lifting 50-pound bags of concrete mix. Joel's hands were soft, manicured, used to nothing heavier than a clipboard. I grabbed his wrist and twisted, not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to make my point. He yelped and stumbled backward, tripping over his discarded pants. Don't touch me, I said quietly. Don't ever touch me. Lena was screaming now, calling me crazy, calling me abusive, threatening to call the police. But I wasn't listening to her anymore. I was looking at the room, really seeing it for the first time. The champagne bottle on the nightstand, the scattered clothes, the bed that was clearly well used. How long? I asked. Mick, please, let's just go home and talk about this like civilized people. Lena's voice had shifted into her professional tone, the one she used in HR meetings when she was trying to manage a difficult situation. How long? She looked away. It's not what you think. 6 months, Joel said, apparently deciding that honesty was his best strategy, now that I'd established the physical dynamics of our conversation. Maybe 7. Lena shot him a look that could have melted steel. Shut up, Joel. 7 months. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Our anniversary is next month. 24 years. Mick, I can explain. No. I held up my hand. No, you really can't. I turned and walked toward the door, then stopped. You know what the funny thing is? I was planning to surprise you for our anniversary. Take you to that bed and breakfast in Vermont you're always talking about. I already made the reservation. Lena's face crumpled. Mick, please don't go. We can work this out. I looked back at her one more time, memorizing the moment. My wife of 23 years, standing in a cheap motel room, begging me not to leave while her lover cowered behind her. We're done, Lena. We're done, and this is just the beginning. I walked out into the parking lot, got in my truck, and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I could see Joel's BMW parked next to Lena's car, and I made a mental note of the license plate. The drive home took 25 minutes, and I spent every one of them planning. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, staring at my phone and the photos I'd taken of the motel parking lot. Lena's BMW next to Joel's. The receipt from the motel office that I'd grabbed when the night clerk wasn't looking. Room 237, paid for with Joel's credit card. Evidence. I was going to need a lot of it. Lena came home at 6:30 a.m., trying to sneak through the front door like she was coming back from an all-night business meeting. She found me waiting in the living room, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. We need to talk, she said, setting down her purse with the careful precision of someone who's rehearsed this conversation in her head. Do we? I leaned back in my chair. Because last night, you seemed pretty clear about where things stood. She sat down across from me, smoothing her skirt like we were about to discuss quarterly reports. What happened last night was a mistake, a terrible mistake, and I'm sorry you had to see it. Sorry I had to see it, I repeated her words slowly. Not sorry you did it. Sorry I saw it. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos. 7 months, Lena. Joel was very specific about the timeline. That means this started right around the time you told me you needed space to focus on your career. Her face went pale. How did you even find us? Does it matter? The point is, I know, and now we have to figure out what comes next. She leaned forward, reaching for my hand. I pulled it away before she could touch me. Mick, I know this looks bad, but it's not what you think. Joel and we have a connection, an intellectual connection. He understands things about me that I don't, I finished. Is that where you were going with that? You have to understand, we've been growing apart for years. We want different things. We've become different people. I haven't become a different person, Lena. I'm the same guy you married. Same job, same friends, same house, same dreams. The only thing that's different is you. She stood up and started pacing, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. That's exactly the problem. You're satisfied with mediocrity. You're content to manage a hardware store for the rest of your life while I'm trying to build something bigger. Mediocrity. The word hit me like a slap. Is that what you think of our life? Of me? I think you're a good man, Mick. But we want different things now. I need someone who challenges me, who pushes me to be better. And Dr. Joel does that for you? In motel rooms that cost $40 a night? Her face flushed red. Don't be crude. Crude? I'm being crude? I stood up, feeling anger rise in my chest like hot water. You're screwing another man, and I'm being crude for mentioning it? This is exactly why this isn't working. You can't discuss anything without getting emotional and raising your voice. I'm getting emotional because my wife is cheating on me. Most people would consider that a reasonable response. She picked up her purse and headed for the stairs. I'm going to shower and change for work. When I get back tonight, I hope we can have a more civilized conversation about how to handle this situation. Handle this situation? I followed her to the bottom of the stairs. This isn't a situation, Lena. This is our marriage ending. This is 23 years going down the drain because you decided to trade up. She paused on the stairs, looking down at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold. Calculating. Maybe it's time we both admitted this marriage has been over for a long time. Maybe Joel just gave me the courage to finally face the truth. Then she went upstairs, leaving me standing in my own living room, feeling like a stranger in my own life. I heard the shower start, and that's when I made my first real decision. I went to her purse, which she'd left on the kitchen counter, and I went through it methodically. Her phone was password protected, but I knew the code. It was our anniversary date, which seemed particularly cruel now. The text messages between her and Joel went back 8 months, not 7. They started professional enough, discussions about treatment schedules and payment. But by March, they'd turned flirtatious. By April, they were explicit. By May, they were planning their first motel meeting. I took screenshots of everything. There were other messages too. Conversations with her sister about how unhappy she was in her marriage. Messages with her friend Trish about how I was holding her back and how she deserved better. Plans for girls' nights out that were actually covers for meetings with Joel. I forwarded the most damaging messages to my own phone, then deleted the evidence of my forwarding them. By the time Lena came back downstairs in her business suit, I was sitting at the kitchen table, reading the newspaper like nothing had happened. I'm going to work, she announced. We'll talk tonight. Sure, I said without looking up. Have a good day at the office. She paused at the door. Mick, what we talked about this morning, I'd appreciate it if you kept it between us for now, until we figure out how to handle things. I looked up from the paper. Of course. Wouldn't want to damage your professional reputation. After she left, I called Peterson's Hardware and told them I was taking a sick day. Then I sat down with my laptop and started researching divorce lawyers. But more importantly, I started researching Dr. Joel Hartman. Joel Hartman had a very nice life. I spent the morning learning all about it. He owned the Hartman Wellness Center on Maple Street, one of those places that advertised holistic healing and total body wellness. His website featured professional photos of him in a white coat, smiling confidently while attractive models pretended to receive chiropractic adjustments. He drove a BMW M3, lived in a condo downtown, and according to his social media profiles, enjoyed rock climbing, wine tasting, and helping people achieve their full potential. What he didn't advertise was that he'd been divorced twice, both times for adultery. That information took a little more digging, but public records are public for a reason. His first wife had caught him with a patient. His second wife had found evidence of multiple affairs. Both divorces had been messy, expensive, and well documented in court filings. Dr. Joel had a type, and apparently that type was married women looking for something missing in their lives. I was still reading when my phone rang. Danny Peterson, my boss at the hardware store. Mick, you sound terrible. What's going on? Danny and I had worked together for 12 years. He'd hired me when I was still trying to figure out what to do with my life after my teaching career ended, and he'd been like a father to me ever since. If I was going to tell anyone the truth, it would be him. Lena's having an affair, I said, silence on the other end of the line. Then, Jesus, Mick, are you sure? Caught them at a motel last night. 7 months it's been going on. I'm sorry, son. I'm really sorry. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. Lawyer, I guess. Divorce. You need anything, you let me know. Time off, money, whatever. And Mick, don't do anything stupid while you're angry. I've seen good men make bad decisions when their world gets turned upside down. After I hung up, I sat there thinking about what Danny had said. Don't do anything stupid. But what constituted stupid? Was it stupid to want justice? Was it stupid to want the people who had destroyed my life to face some consequences? My phone buzzed with a text message from my friend Mike Torres, who worked at the police department. Heard about you and Lena. Sorry, man. You okay? Word was already getting out. In a town of 30,000 people, news traveled fast, especially news about people's personal lives falling apart. I wondered who was talking. Probably someone at the motel, or maybe one of Lena's friends who couldn't keep their mouth shut. I texted back, I'll survive. Thanks for checking on me. Mike responded immediately. Beer tonight? O'Malley's at 7? O'Malley's was our usual spot, a dive bar on the south side of town where the beer was cheap and the conversation was honest. It seemed like a good place to start figuring out what came next. I'll be there, I replied. I spent the rest of the afternoon making phone calls. First to a divorce attorney named Sarah Chen, who came highly recommended and had a reputation for being thorough. Her secretary scheduled me for an appointment the next morning. Then to my bank to get copies of all our financial statements for the past.
She texted you come back to bed at 3 a.m. Last Tuesday, you told me you were at your sister's.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Past year. Finally, to a private investigator named Tom Bradley, who advertised discreet professional services in the Yellow Pages. Tom agreed to meet me at O'Malley's at 6:30, an hour before Mike was supposed to show up. O'Malley's hadn't changed in the 15 years I'd been going there. Same sticky floors, same neon beer signs, same smell of cigarettes and desperation that had been baked into the walls over decades. Tom Bradley was easy to spot. He looked exactly like what you'd expect a private investigator to look like. 50-something, gray hair, wearing a jacket that had seen better days. You're Mick? He asked, sliding into the booth across from me. That's me. Tell me what you need. I laid out the situation as clearly as I could. The affair, the timeline, what I'd already discovered. Tom listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a small pad. What's your goal here? He asked when I finished. You want evidence for the divorce, or you want to know everything there is to know about this guy? Both. I want to know who I'm dealing with. I want to know if there are other women. I want to know if he's done this before, and if he's planning to do it again. Tom nodded. That's smart. Guys like this, they don't usually stop at one affair. They're predators. They find vulnerable women, and they exploit them. My wife isn't vulnerable. She's successful, intelligent, independent. Mr. Landry, with respect, your wife is screwing a chiropractor in a $40 motel room. Something made her vulnerable to this guy's pitch. My job is to find out what that something was, and what he's doing with other women. He quoted me a daily rate that made me wince, but I agreed. Some things are worth the investment. Mike showed up at 7 on the dot, looking uncomfortable in the way that people do when they have to deliver bad news to a friend. How are you holding up? He asked, ordering a beer from the bartender. I've been better. How much do you know? Just what I heard around town, that you and Lena are having problems. I filled him in on the details, watching his expression get more and more grim as the story unfolded. Dr. Joel Hartman, he said when I finished. I know that name. From where? A couple of domestic disturbance calls over the years. Nothing that resulted in charges, but his name's come up, usually involving married women whose husbands weren't happy about their treatment plans. Any of those cases go anywhere? Mike shook his head. Hard to prove anything. He's careful, professional. But there's been talk. We sat in silence for a while, drinking our beers and watching the evening news on the TV above the bar. Finally, Mike spoke up. What are you planning to do, Mick? And don't tell me you don't have a plan. I can see it in your eyes. I looked at my oldest friend, a man I'd known since high school, and I told him the truth. I'm going to destroy him. The next morning, I met with Sarah Chen, the divorce attorney. Her office was in one of those converted Victorian houses downtown. All hardwood floors and tall windows that let in too much light. Sarah herself was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made you understand why she had such a good reputation. Mr. Landry, she said, reviewing the file I'd brought her, this is quite comprehensive. You've been thorough. I used to be a teacher. Research is a habit. She smiled at that. Good habit to have in a divorce case. Now, let me ask you the important question. What do you want out of this process? I want out of the marriage. I want it to be fair, financially speaking. And I want her to understand that actions have consequences. Revenge isn't something I can help you with in a legal sense, Sarah said carefully. But justice? That's different. That's what the legal system is designed to provide. She walked me through the process, the timeline, the likely outcomes. New York was a no-fault divorce state, which meant the adultery wouldn't affect the financial settlement much, but it would make things simpler procedurally. The house, our savings, her retirement account, everything would be split down the middle unless we could prove financial misconduct. Has she spent marital assets on the affair? Sarah asked. I thought about the motel rooms, the new clothes, the expensive dinners that I now realized hadn't been business meetings. Probably I'll need to go through the credit card statements. Do that. Document everything. And Mr. Landry, I know this is difficult, but try to avoid direct confrontation with your wife or her friend. Anything that could be construed as harassment or intimidation will hurt your case. I promised to be careful, but I was already thinking about Tom Bradley and what he might discover. Tom called me that afternoon while I was at work, trying to lose myself in inventory spreadsheets and customer service. Your boy Joel is busy, he said without preamble. 3 regular patients who fit the profile, all married, all seeing him for extended treatment periods. Meaning? Meaning he's got a system. He identifies women who are unhappy in their marriages, usually women with money or status, and he becomes their confidant, their healer, their friend, and then their lover. I felt my jaw clench. Names. Can't give you names, client confidentiality. But I can tell you that 2 of them are currently in divorce proceedings, and one of them specifically cited her relationship with Dr. Joel as the catalyst for ending her marriage. How long has he been doing this? Based on what I can document, at least 5 years, probably longer. I thanked Tom and hung up, then sat in my office staring at the wall. 5 years of destroying marriages, 5 years of breaking up families, and now he'd gotten to mine. That evening, Lena came home with Chinese takeout and a conciliatory smile. I thought we could have dinner and talk, she said, unpacking containers on the kitchen table. Really talk this time, without all the emotion from yesterday. I sat down across from her and opened my container of lo mein. What did you want to talk about? About us? About what happens next? She picked at her food nervously. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday about our marriage being over. Maybe you're right. Maybe we've both known it for a while and just didn't want to admit it. Is that your professional opinion, Dr. Lena? She ignored the sarcasm. I think we could handle this maturely, amicably. We could separate quietly, divide our assets fairly, and move on with our lives without a lot of drama. Quietly, I repeated. You mean without anyone finding out about Joel? I mean without making this harder than it has to be, for both of us. I set down my fork and looked at her. Really looked at her. She was still beautiful at 43, still the woman I'd fallen in love with in college. But there was something different in her eyes now. Something calculating that I'd never seen before. What did Joel tell you to say to me, Lena? Her face flushed. This isn't about Joel. This is about us. Everything's about Joel now. That's the point. I leaned back in my chair. Tell me something. When did you decide I wasn't good enough for you anymore? Was it gradual? Or was there a specific moment when you looked at me and thought, I can do better than this? Mick, don't do this. Do what? Ask honest questions? I thought that's what you wanted. Honest conversation. She stood up and started clearing the table, even though we'd barely touched the food. I don't want to hurt you any more than I already have. Too late for that, don't you think? She stopped moving and looked at me. What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? I am sorry. I'm sorry it happened this way. I'm sorry you found out the way you did, but I'm not sorry it happened. Because you love him. Because he makes me feel alive again. Because when I'm with him, I remember who I used to be before I became just someone's wife. The words hit me like a physical blow. 23 years of marriage, and she saw herself as just someone's wife. I see, I said quietly. Well, that's honest, at least. Mick! No, I appreciate the honesty. It clarifies things. I stood up and headed for the door. Where are you going? Out. Don't wait up. I drove to O'Malley's, but instead of going inside, I sat in the parking lot and called Tom Bradley. I need to know everything, I told him. Not just about Joel, about all of them. The other women, their husbands, what happened to their families. I want the whole picture. That's going to take time and money. I've got both. 3 days later, Tom delivered a file that was 2 inches thick. 5 years of Dr. Joel Hartman's extracurricular activities, documented in painful detail. Photos, financial records, testimony from private investigators hired by suspicious husbands, court documents from divorce proceedings. The pattern was always the same. Joel would identify a target, usually a woman in her late 30s or early 40s, successful, married to someone she considered beneath her potential. He would begin with legitimate treatment, then gradually introduce elements of personal counseling, emotional support, and intimate conversation. He would position himself as someone who truly understood her, who could see her potential in ways her husband couldn't. The physical relationship would begin within 3 to 4 months. The women would start lying to their husbands, making excuses, creating elaborate cover stories. They would spend money on new clothes, new experiences, hotel rooms. They would begin to see their marriages as prisons and their husbands as jailers. And then, inevitably, they would be caught. The marriages would end. The women would expect Joel to leave his comfortable bachelor lifestyle and commit to them permanently. That's when Joel would discover that he wasn't ready for that level of commitment, that he needed space to focus on his practice, that he thought they should both explore their options before making any permanent decisions. 5 women in 5 years, 5 marriages destroyed, 5 families broken apart, and now he was working on number 6. I closed the file and picked up my phone. It was time to start making some calls. The first call I made was to David Morrison. According to Tom's file, David's wife Jennifer had been involved with Joel 2 years ago. Their divorce had been finalized 18 months ago, and David had lost his house, half his retirement savings, and custody of his 2 daughters. David worked at the Ford dealership on Route 9. I found him in the service department, wearing coveralls and looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in the past too. David Morrison? I extended my hand. I'm Mick Landry. I think we need to talk. He looked confused until I mentioned Joel's name. Then, his expression hardened. What do you want to know? He asked, wiping his hands on a rag. Everything. How it started, how it ended, what it cost you. We talked for an hour during his lunch break. David's story was almost identical to what was happening to me, except that he hadn't found out until it was too late to document the financial damage Jennifer had done. By the time he discovered the affair, she'd already spent $15,000 of their savings on clothes, trips, and hotel rooms. She'd also taken out a second mortgage on their house without telling him, using the money to invest in Joel's practice expansion. The worst part, David said, was that she made me feel like it was my fault, like I'd driven her to it by being boring, by not appreciating her, by not supporting her dreams. What dreams? She wanted to open her own business, interior design. Joel convinced her she had natural talent, that she was wasting her potential being married to a mechanic. David laughed bitterly. You know what she's doing now? Working at Target, living in a studio apartment, and Joel won't return her phone calls. Would you be willing to talk to other people about what happened? Other men whose wives got involved with Joel? David's eyes lit up with something that looked like hope. You mean I'm not the only one? You're not even close to being the only one. My second call was to Robert Chen, husband number 3 on Tom's list. Robert was a high school principal whose wife had left him for Joel 18 months ago. Unlike David, Robert had been smart enough to hire a private investigator early in the process, so he had extensive documentation of the affair and the financial damage. Robert agreed to meet me for coffee the next morning. I've been waiting for someone to do something about that bastard, Robert said, stirring sugar into his coffee. He destroys families for sport. What did you try to do about it? Everything I could think of. I filed complaints with the state licensing board. I reported him to the Better Business Bureau. I even tried to get the police interested, but there's nothing illegal about adultery in New York. What about the licensing board? They investigated. Slap on the wrist. Apparently, as long as he's not assaulting patients or billing insurance fraudulently, they don't much care what he does in his personal time. Robert opened a briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. But I kept everything. Financial records, photos, recordings of phone conversations between my wife and Joel. I was hoping to use it all in a civil suit, but my lawyer said it would be hard to prove damages. What if you weren't the only plaintiff? Robert leaned forward. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that one man with a grudge looks like a bitter ex-husband. But 5 men with documented evidence of a pattern of predatory behavior? That looks like a case. My third call was to James Murphy, whose wife had been Joel's most recent victim before Lena. James was a plumber who owned his own business, and his wife Carol had been seeing Joel for 6 months before James caught them together. James was different from David and Robert. Where they were sad and defeated, James was angry. Furiously, dangerously angry. I wanted to kill him, James told me when we met at a diner outside town. I mean, literally kill him. I bought a gun. I sat outside his office for 3 hours with that gun in my lap, thinking about walking in there and putting a bullet in his head. What stopped you? My kids. They'd already lost their mother to that bastard. I couldn't let them lose their father to prison too. James clenched his fists on the table. But I swear to God, if I ever see him alone somewhere, I don't know if I'll be able to control myself. There are better ways to get revenge than murder, James. Yeah? Like what? I told him about my plan. About the other men I'd contacted, about the evidence we were gathering, about the civil suit we could file, and about the publicity campaign that would destroy Joel's reputation and his business. You think it'll work? James asked. I think it's better than going to prison for murder. Bye.